Hi, welcome to my show. This is Q&A Live. I'm your host, Stephen Drunsic. Tonight we are going to be interviewing two candidates for the House seat in the Bennington District Number 4 that comprises Arlington, Manchester, Sandgate, and Sunderland. I'll be speaking to Steve Barry and Tony DuPont, both of Manchester. So let's get on with it. Hey, Steve Barry, thanks for coming on my show. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be with you, Steve.
So you decided to jump into the snake pit.
Well, I don't know if it's a snake pit, but yeah, I decided to give this a try.
Well, now, just give me a little background. I know you've been in the community for a number of years here.
14 years.
And you live here in Manchester.
Right.
Of course, our district, Bennington District Number 4, comprises Arlington, Sunderland, Sandgate, and Manchester. Right. And of course, there are 2 seats in the House, of which 4 are running. Cynthia Browning, Judy Livingston, yourself, and Tony DuPont. Maybe just a little bit of background as to how you arrived at this decision, and maybe a little bit of background of who you are and what you've done here in the community.
Okay. Well, I never thought of entering politics until 2014. And the reason for that was very simple. Beginning in February, when I received a telephone call from someone asking for some support for a proposal to call for a constitutional convention for the state of Vermont. That got my interest. And what that constitutional convention for an amendment to the Constitution was about was to get big special interest money out of politics. I think that politics and politicians right now, at least on the national level, are really pretty nasty. And I think that politicians are getting bought off by special interest money. And I don't think Citizens United is at all helpful for the people of the United States. And so I was willing to put myself on the line and get involved. And that involvement led to Vermont becoming the first state in the United States to call for a constitutional convention to kick out Citizens United and get special interest money out of our government. So that was number one. Number two, almost coordinatingly, I was involved with the label GMO movement, and people, hundreds, thousands have been involved. There's been a tsunami of people involved with this great cause for a long time. We have a right to know what's in our food. It's just that simple. And so I testified up in Montpelier and urged our congressmen and senators to become involved with that, and they did, and without a trigger clause.
And it was successful.
Both.
Legislation.
So the
first in the country.
First in the country for Vermont in both cases. And in June, California followed suit. So now they have called for a constitutional convention. And Illinois is about to fall. And pretty soon it's going to be the United States is going to have a call for the constitutional convention. And I will have been one of the ones who promoted that. And I feel very proud of that. And secondly, Vermont and label GMOs is also a number one, and we have the right to know what we're buying when something is on the shelf. So I feel good about those two things.
Well, okay, so it sounds like through your advocacy work that you've done on these issues, you've developed an inclination to potentially spend more time potentially in a position up in the House where you can be effective on a number of issues. Of course, the issues that you just mentioned are issues that I think are near and dear to all Vermonters' hearts. But if you were to take a poll on the street right now, I'm sure the top 2 issues that folks are thinking about are property taxes, tax reform, and Act 68. Those are probably all tied together.
Yeah.
Single-payer health care, of course, which Governor Shumlin has been a big proponent of, and Act 48 in 2011 was passed basically to put us on a path to single-payer.
That's right, that's right.
Then, of course, we've got some issues with jobs and the economy, the environment, which I know is one of your issues that you have, that, of course, it motivates you. So I just want to get into some of these issues because there's a lot of discussion right now in what's going to happen in this upcoming session on property tax reform. Obviously, it's a big issue for Vermonters. The Democrats have some proposals out there for trying to reform the process by potentially looking at an income tax scheme and taking making us less reliant on property taxes and more reliant on other forms of taxation. But there are a couple of issues that I thought were interesting. 70% of Vermonters are income sensitized. Mm-hmm. And spending on schools has gone up from $780 million to $1.5 billion since 1997. The school enrollment has gone down by 20%. So we've got this issue of higher school spending, lower enrollment, and higher property taxes. What is when people bring this issue up to you, what's your response, and how do you think we should address this?
Well, I know, I feel it in my pocketbook. Mm-hmm. I know that there's a problem with that. I know that has to be some adjustments. But what most people don't know is that the property taxes were put into place by a Republican government, a legislature, in 2002. And the graduated scale that they had was even larger than what they've had to endure under the proposed, I guess you'd call it a variance, or the proposal that was finally passed, where the adjustments were made by Democrats to bring the price. Act 68. But they brought the graduated scale down. The Democratic legislature did. The issue for us is how much can you afford? And it's really out of whack. We can't afford to pay the huge taxes we're paying. How we solve that really means that we have to get our minds together and think about strategizing how to best do that. And so I'm interested in listening to other people and getting really good minds around this whole issue and finding out how my property taxes and your property taxes can come down, and what goes if we do that. In other words, is there going to be a burden placed upon children? Is there going to be, where are we going to have to make the decision to cut something else out? So that has to be scrutinized, I think, really carefully. So I don't have the solution.
Right.
It's a very complex problem. I don't have the solution to that, but I do have the interest in dealing with it in a really intelligent, articulate way that does not hurt children, but also where everyone in the state is called into accountability. Everyone has responsibility for taxes. Everyone should pay something into the system.
Well, and of course, there's always been that argument that there's a disconnect because where the money gets spent and how we make those funding decisions by voting in our school budgets, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And so there's been talk about trying to reconnect those two and making it more of a local discussion and a local responsibility for raising the funds. Would you support any kind of school consolidation plan? I know that's one of the proposals in terms of coming at it from trying to find ways to make the system more efficient.
I'm not sure. What I can say is that I believe in our area we have school choice, and I'm for school choice. I think we have fabulous schools. I don't think that one size fits all. In terms of consolidation, well, how do you do it? If persons want to hold on to their schools, then and there is this idea, well, we do not want to be part of that plan, then isn't it up to the responsibility of those citizens in that particular area to ensure that they can continue their schools rather than depend on someone else? So I don't know the answer, but I'm thinking, gee, you have to really be careful with this, but I'd be very open to consolidation, but not with abandoning some of the great things that we already have. Burton is among the best schools in the whole state. I would not in any way want to jeopardize what they do and how they do it, or for that matter, the other schools in our area. So I would have to sit and listen and get all the information I possibly can and do my own research, and then meet with other minds and make some determinations.
And that's obviously, having a pragmatic approach going into something like this is certainly what the voters would expect of you, of any candidate that they're sending to the House, is to go in with an open mind, be a good listener, and I think that's important. Moving on, just because of our time, single payer, big issue, obviously. Governor Shumlin, one of the other candidates, was it Patty Conway or Cynthia Browning, who was trying to get more information from Peter Shumlin as to how he's going to fund single payer, of which
Yeah.
his administration has not been able to produce as of yet.
Right.
From figures I've looked at and some research, we're talking about $2 billion in new revenue needed to fund this program. And no one's really been able to identify where that money is going to come from. I mean, it sounds like a very heavy lift. Do you think that the legislature is going to have it in them to tackle this year, and where do you stand on that issue?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm a little foggy about the numbers. Doesn't it cost $5.2 billion right now for health care? And what are we getting out of it? If I can get an appendectomy in one place and it costs me $1,500, and another place, the same appendectomy would cost me $150,000, there's something out of whack with the system.
No doubt about it.
And so health care is a human right, or should be. If you're interested in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, then that's one of the rights, health care. It's just so simple. Everyone should be able to afford to see a doctor. In our state, that applies right across the board. I think that every person should be responsible for paying something into the system. If you're in welfare or if you're very wealthy, it doesn't matter. Everyone, as they can, on a graduated scale, should pay something into a healthcare system. But they should not bear the whole burden. There should not be exorbitant prices. And I think that privatization of healthcare is absolutely wrong. One place it costs $90 for a pharmaceutical, for one pill. Another place you can get the same thing for $4.
Sure.
So I am absolutely for universal healthcare. Universal healthcare. I think that is something that I would urge, and that I will seek to find ways in which to pay for it. But if it becomes the first priority for us in the legislature, and I think that it should, then let's solve that problem. And we'll find it. Americans are very ingenious. We've solved bigger problems than this before. We'll solve this problem, but it takes smart people getting their minds together to find out how to do it and put that as a number one priority for our state.
And, of course, I think that's very noble to have that ambition. Of course, some might argue that if we're looking for universal health care and we're the only state in the union that could potentially achieve that result, what's to say that because our borders are essentially porous with other states, that the quality of our health care that we offer might suffer? In other words, if we've got a system in place where I would have to presume the government is now negotiating on behalf of all the patients for lower prices.
Yes.
And that's a noble effort. Certainly, no one would argue that prices are out of whack in healthcare, and that discrepancy you talked about with certain procedures from one hospital to another is vastly out of whack. And unfortunately, that is a function of the private insurance industry, which is accustomed to passing those costs off. But is there some concern that the quality of service might suffer if we're operating as a sole single-payer system here throughout the union?
Well, I can't definitively answer that, but I can say that people are already suffering. So I think that there will be a great leveling. The incentive will be that the doctors have a good pay, that it'll be reasonable amount that individuals can pay, the services will be provided for everyone, and some will not be cut out of the system. The Affordable Care Act allows for people with pre-existing conditions to receive health care. One of the things that has not been done is to incentivize people having good health. So perhaps what we need to do is to say, look, you stop smoking, here's a check at the end of the year for being a good citizen, having good health, taking care of yourself, and so on. Oh, you lost 25 pounds. That's great. Let me give you a check back from the government because you have been paying attention. See, we all need to act in a healthy manner.
Sure.
We all have a responsibility. It's not just the government that has a responsibility to us. It's not just the state. It is how we respond, how we act within the context of our community and in the context of our own family. So good food, healthy habits, all those really are factors in terms of health care. Absolutely.
Empowering personal responsibility. And
exactly.
that's a big push.
Big push.
Okay.
I would urge that, and it's not like a free ride. It's like everybody has to pay in. Everybody is a responsible person, and no one should be left off the hook in terms of their individual responsibility to themselves, to the healthcare system.
Of course, now we're fortunate that we live in a state that's, I think, rated one of the top states in the nation for health, fitness of adults, the fitness of our children. And part of that, of course, is a function of the clean environment that we have here in the state.
Absolutely
I know
true.
that's one of your issues that you're a vocal proponent for, obviously, is the health of our environment here. How does that interest you? What kind of issues would you advance if you were to advance into the House?
Like you, I grew up in this state, and I love it. This is where I have my fondest memories. So I want to make sure that my grandchildren have clean water, and that the things that I took for granted as a child, I don't think we can take for granted anymore. So I would like to make sure that we have some things in the legislature to ensure that a corporation, and I know this has happened in Maine, cannot go and put a drill in and draw out all the water from the aquifer and then sell it back to us for $5 a gallon. I think that there needs to be this whole idea of conserving our resources, making sure that our land is not polluted. And for those persons who want to pollute the land, they should be taxed more highly. We also need, I think, to make sure that those things that are on the books in legislature are actually enforced. There's a lot of things that are going on where people have not enforced the law, and we've seen that with a runoff in Lake Champlain.
Okay, and that's an interesting point, because some might argue that the largest polluters in the state come from our agricultural economy.
And I'm saying that
well, on one hand, we always look at corporations. The biggest issue right now, runoff, is due to excess phosphorus, which is running off from arable lands from our large ag companies.
Well, big ag
or big ag farmers, I guess, in general.
Big ag, but big ag is being subsidized also. All right? I'm for the small farmers. Anything I can possibly do for small business and small farms and people who are Vermonters who want to make their businesses go, I'm all for that. For 5,000 head herd of cows, I'm not having the same discussion that I have with my small farmers. When I speak to Scout Proft or I speak to Oliver, you know, I know my farmers. That's where I get my food.
Sure. Yep.
And I want to make sure I have safe food. So that's why I buy from the local markets and have buying local as a top priority for me and for my household. But that's different when you have this huge farm and you have huge runoff, and then they say, oh, I'm not responsible. Well, they are responsible. And somebody has to go and say, you are responsible and you're going to pay. The taxpayer should not pay for that.
And
you should pay.
And of course, you know, when you look at the farm bills that get rammed through on the federal level, you know, most of the benefit accrues to a very small percentage of large-scale agricultural operations. So that's a very good point, and I think one that resonates well with the constituency, particularly in this area, because for the most part, we are not comprised of large operations. I think Wilcox may be the largest in the area.
But that's small, and I agree 100% with them. They do a fabulous job. I love my Wilcox ice cream. And they're good neighbors, and I know them, and I respect them. Those are the people that I would like to see supported. Those people should, if you want to give subsidies, give it to small farmers. Make their cheese establishments go, and their whatever they're doing with the ice cream and so on. Help them out.
So how come they don't have a bigger voice in our House, the small farmers?
Well, they don't have me there yet.
Okay.
Once I get there, they're going to have a voice. Now, it's really smart.
But is that something that we can affect on a local level?
Absolutely, we can do it. I think because the more people become engaged in their local and regional areas on issues of import like this, the better our government functions. The bulwark of democracy is having individuals who get involved and who care. And so I care. That's why I'm running. I'm not interested in the social scene in Montpelier. I don't have any
There's
friends.
a social scene in Montpelier?
I've heard. I don't have any friends there.
I'll have to ask Jeff Wilson about that.
I don't have any friends there. All I know is that when I go there, I will represent to the best of my ability the people of our area and the state of Vermont in ensuring that what we love about Vermont can be preserved and protected and made better. A healthy citizenry, a healthy democracy, and a healthy environment is really what I'm after. And everything, in my estimation, falls under the rubric of health. So all of the things that we're looking at, all the things we're dealing with, is long-term, not just short-term and what's expedient, but the long-term health of our people.
Okay, now what about the health of our economy?
Good point.
Here's an issue. We do have a fairly low unemployment rate relative to the rest of the country, but our demographics are trending against us. You know, we're one of the oldest states in the Union, and we're getting older. We're losing young adults, and our birth rate is going down. Obviously, you've got a smaller productive base to support a larger elderly base. And there's questions about how Vermont compares with other states in terms of being having a good business climate. I know there's I think the Economist gives Vermont an F. It all depends on how you look at it and for what kind of companies, what kind of businesses are looking to locate here. But what's your stance on the Vermont economy, and what do you think is important in terms of driving jobs and job growth and economic growth in this state? Well,
I think that first of all, political systems aren't really good when it comes to looking at economics. Politics is always game for people shooting at it, but economics is not. So if you say, oh, I know a lot about economics, then you get a pass. The reality is we're in a culture that's supported neoliberal economics forever. And now we're living in a post-fossil fuel era. If you're not looking at the whole issue of climate change and what climate change is doing, and look at that in terms of the economy, then you're not paying attention. Because you can't keep on growing exponentially all the time and then expect for there to be health. You can't do it. Healthy economy has to do with an ecosystem. You have to look at it as a full household, very circular type of thinking. So the linear economics that we have been dealing with don't work anymore, but what attracts people to Vermont is holism, is healthy everything. It's Vermont's brand. That's what you capitalize to bring people in, and that's what you have to do to incentivize people to put money, and the legislature needs to do this, put money aside so that people who want to build their businesses, they have lower interest rates for their businesses.
So business incentives, like what they're doing in New York State, right across the border.
Yes. Well, but we can't do it the same way because they're huge. They've got many, many people. We can't do it the same way. We have to do it in our way. It's a Vermont way that celebrates the persons who are here, who are working really hard, and that makes sure that the climate is right for people who want to come in and give themselves an opportunity here in Vermont. That has not been focused on very well. And that's something that I would really be interested in looking into. I don't know all the nuances of it, but I know that you have to look at the ecosystem of ecology, not the economics that come out of the 19th century when you could do anything you wanted to because you had the petrol. There was no question. You could just build and grow and grow and grow, and now this has caused so many problems all across the globe. And it would cause problems here if we had that mindset too. What we need to do is look very specifically at the importance of the local and the regional and how to grow the businesses here and what can incentivize people to come here and giving those people breaks so that they really do a great job and they're supported by their local communities. I think that's really important.
And I think everyone would agree that those are goals that we all would like to see in our communities. But the question does remain, do you think that there are improvements that can be made in terms of how the state treats businesses? And I'll give two examples. One is Act 250. Act 250 there was some reform, and this really had to do with the whole process of appeals with Act 250. And I'm just curious as to whether or not you may have an interest or are aware of any kind of movement to resurrect the revisiting Act 250 and potentially looking for some reforms that would help streamline that process.
Well, I would, because I need to come up to speed on all of this.
Mm-hmm.
This is really new to me, so I don't have specifics at this time. But in 6 months, when I'm in the House,
Mm-hmm.
then you can ask me the same question, and I will. I think I'll be able to be more
Understandable.
articulate on this.
Sure.
So, but the incentivizing, rather than de-incentivizing people to
Mm-hmm.
be involved with business here, is really, I think, a very important issue to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Because if young people want to come here, but that there's nothing for them,
Right.
then why? Why not spend a lot of time and energy and effort to come up with something that's going to make them say, yeah, hey, look I would love to have a family there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to bring, myself there and work.
But it's an expensive state to live in.
But
then again, we've got a great environment and
Yeah.
healthy outlook in general relative to some of the other states that, for instance, I actually just, not to editorialize, but a study just came out recently about the hardest counties to live in. And if you looked at the map, a lot of the hardest counties for families were actually down south, and some of the best counties were actually up in New England, which, is interesting because that does kind of contradict to some extent what you read when you're looking about the competitiveness, competitiveness of an economy of a state, for instance, Vermont. So,
Right. So Mississippi here and Vermont there, where do I want to live?
yeah,
So
No brainer.
No
brainer, right.
For me, this is a state that I love. This is a place I love. I love Vermonters. I love this state. It's not like the sky is falling. It's not like we have a lot of work to do, but this is the best state. This is the best place to live. It's the healthiest place to live. It's the most beautiful place to live.
Mm-hmm.
So why not preserve what we love? Why not do the best with what we have,
Mm-hmm.
and then improve the things that need improvement? I'm not ready to trash the state of Vermont. I'm not ready to, and some of the stuff that I hear is so silly.
Sure.
Oh gosh, Vermont is terrible. Oh, I heard somebody just railing against Vermont the other day. A person lives in Manchester, and I heard another person railing against Vermont, and oh, how terrible it is, and blah, blah, blah. Well, they live very nice lives. Don't do very much for the community. They're not community involved.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're talking about how bad the state is. Well, then go to
Yeah.
Mississippi.
Right,
Mississippi would love to welcome you. I'm saying, I'm being facetious there. I'm sorry. But I'm saying, look,
Yeah.
if you want to live here, then you have to also respond in a way that's positive.
Mm-hmm.
Try your best.
Right.
Help people who are in need. Do what you can to make the place that you live a better place to live.
I think that's a good outlook to have, and every citizen should have that kind of outlook that you just espouse. One more question, because we're running out of time, but infrastructure, roads, bridges, access to high speed.
Right.
Vermont does actually fare better than a lot of other states in the nation. Of course, and we just approved this gas tax, which will go toward helping to plug that gap because we've got a stalled transportation bill down in Washington.
Yeah.
Any ideas on how we can improve on our infrastructure? Of course, having healthy infrastructure is certainly a great way to incentivize businesses and,
Sure it is.
and people to live here.
Yeah.
Have access to high speed in their homes and drive on roads that aren't full of potholes and bridges that are sturdy.
So the infrastructure, I think that once again, this is a health issue, health for the state of Vermont. Tell you one thing, if you go to New Hampshire, you cross through Bellows Falls, you notice a difference right away. They don't take care. They don't take care of their state. Mm-hmm. We do take care. And our roads construction season is from May until right now. And people have been on the roads the whole time. And look at how nice they are. Route 30, they fixed up this year. So what I think is that, let's look at the infrastructure thing, but the biggest thing also is the internet, is that, the technology. That will be a huge incentive for young people to come here.
How are we going to do it?
Well, that's again
The last mile. How do we do that? You may not have an answer. I mean, who knows whether
Well,
we have an answer?
I
But
think
maybe you do have some
I think
input.
that there are answers out there, and I think that it has to do with writing I wrote the RFP for cable standards for the city of St. Louis back in when cable was coming to town. Cable, and which is now going to be going out of town, but I know how to write proposals, and I know how to do that. And I think that what we have are some really great possibilities because we're right on this cusp of changing things dramatically all over the place. How that will be articulated legislatively, I'm not sure, but I know that there's an interest there on my part as a filmmaker and as one who's been involved with some technology over the years that, that's one to work on, and that'll be bringing a lot of creative people into Vermont, young people like yourself, and also with young families. Once that one, that's going to be a key linchpin in terms of not only infrastructure but also in attractiveness to come to what is already the best state in the union to ply their abilities.
Apply their trade, yeah,
That's
their
right.
ways. Well, you certainly have enthusiasm, and it sounds like you've got a lot of great ideas. I appreciate you coming on here. We didn't get a lot of time to talk about
That is great.
where you came from, but you'll have an opportunity tomorrow. I understand there's a debate tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I just really appreciate you coming on, and
I thank
good
you
luck
very
to
much,
you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, for having me.
All right.
And I think GNAT is fantastic what they do.
They certainly
and
are.
What an extraordinary change since over the years. What I saw early on, Tammy Riley has done a phenomenal job. They have a great staff here. I think so highly of them. They've been very helpful to me when I've done some things here.
They made me partially famous too. I get stopped in
right.
town.
That's
Hey, you're on
fantastic.
TV.
That's right, exactly. But
Or
it's
maybe
really
infamous.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful facility, but great people. And so congratulations
Yeah.
to GNAT.
Great. Well, thanks,
Okay.
Steve.
Thanks.
All right. Well, and we're back. Tony DuPont, thanks for joining me on my show. Really appreciate it.
Steve, glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So, you were a Pan Am pilot, a career in aerospace. You retired to Vermont in 2009, and here you are running for a House seat in the Bennington District number 4. Can you just give me some background on yourself and why you're interested in taking a run at the House seat?
Well, it was the last of my intentions when I arrived here, but
It says you wanted to retire here.
yeah, that's exactly right.
Right.
But between some of the activities of the legislature and the taxes and all, everybody complained about it, but nobody was trying to do anything about it. So I said, well, rather than complain about it, you should try to do something about it. So that's why I'm running.
Okay. Great. And so when you made this decision, it sounds like you have some ideas as to how you want to approach them. I mean, there's some concerns that you have, particularly with you said taxes. Maybe we can get into that right now, this issue, because as I was reviewing with Mr. Berry, if you polled anyone out on the street, the biggest issue right now, I think, is property taxes.
Yeah, that's right. You go
right.
door to door. That's what you hear.
Exactly. Obviously, people are concerned. They continue to spiral upwards. What are some of your ideas as to how to address that issue?
Well, I think the root cause of it is that the cost of the education establishment, talking about the whole thing,
Sure.
keeps going up every year, so they have to push the taxes to pay for it. In addition to that, there's some things that are in the education budget that maybe shouldn't be there, so there could be some.
For instance?
Some help. Well, understand that there's something like $27 million that the general fund is supposed to contribute to the education fund, but is not in the education fund for the last several years.
Okay.
And I'm not a great expert in all the details of the budget, but I've been told by people like Cynthia Browning that know better than I do.
Right.
That there's some things in there that, in her view, don't belong there.
Sure, and well, I think a lot of supporters of property tax reform well, first of all, I think there are two key statistics that are important. You've got 70% of Vermonters are income sensitized, meaning that they don't actually pay their property tax bill, but they pay their property taxes based on their income.
Yeah.
So obviously, you can understand why there might be upward pressure on the property taxes for those that aren't income sensitized. Are you then maybe proposing that we need to address income sensitivity? Do we need to get off reliance on property taxes altogether? Do we need to move towards an income tax model? Or do we just need to address it from the spending side of the equation?
Well, I think the spending side is the most important. We're in this situation where every year there's more teachers instructing less students.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be treasurer, or trustee, and then when I was out of town, they elected me treasurer of a private school in California. At the time, we owed $1 million to the bank, so
Mm-hmm.
this was not a plum assignment.
Right.
But anyway, we worked our way out of that and got in the black and stayed there. But we were always struggling to get a student-teacher ratio that was like in the 20s,
Mm-hmm.
not 10 minus like we have now in Vermont.
I think it's 4 or 5 actually.
Well, if
It's statewide.
We're talking about pure teachers now, not just faculty people.
Okay, all right.
And so that says we really have too many teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a tough call as to how to really reduce that, but I think Governor Douglas was the guy that first suggested this, that if you hired one teacher for every 2 that retire, gradually you can adjust that to something more reasonable.
Yeah, sure. And of course, when you do you look at a graph of enrollment, which is declining 20% since 1997, and the education budget, which has been increasing from $800 billion to $1.5 billion over the same period, there is a very large disconnect there. But depending on who you speak to, they've got different ideas as to how to solve this problem. How do you incentivize?
Yeah, well,
It sounds like you're proposing incentivization of attrition.
Well, I said that's a way of fixing it. I had to get incentive to do it. That's another problem. That I think the income sensitivity, you're correct. That's kind of there's a jumping off point when you get to the top. I mean, you're probably in a house that would pay 4 or 5 times as much in taxes as you're paying with your income sensitivity.
Exactly.
So there's some injustice.
But not only that, but it seems like there's a little bit of disconnect.
Yeah.
If you're not paying the full,
Yeah.
What you're obligated to by your property taxes, and you're paying based on your income, and yet we're approving budgets that continue to go up. And that's what a lot of people allude to, is there's kind of a disconnect, because we need to reconnect those two.
Well, there's another disconnect, which is like in Manchester last year, the school budget was held to like a 1% increase or something very small.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, our taxes went up 5%, just like everybody else. So
Because of the statewide portion.
It's not like the money that you raise in your town is spent on your school. It's just like the taxes are just a way that the state can use you to collect their taxes.
So why not repeal Act 68 altogether?
That might be a smart idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not...
Probably difficult to get in this.
Well, I'm not an expert in all the ins and outs of Act 68, but according to people that have studied this, that all these tweaks over the years, none of them have really worked. The taxes just, like you say, here's a graph, the students are doing like this, taxes are going like that, and the cost of living is going like this.
It's like that third rail. No one really wants to
But
get too close to it.
To summarize the situation that we're in is we're paying like 50% more per student than the national average, and I don't think our kids are 50% smarter.
Yeah.
So that
well, and of course our
that.
tax base. Look at our tax base. We've got our demographic that's moving against us. We've got an aging population, and it seems that we're having a problem attracting young workers who are going to be able to support and grow that base. Just maybe a good segue to speaking about the Vermont economy and jobs in general. We do have a relatively low unemployment rate. But there are concerns as to how the state competes against other states in the union in terms of being a competitive, having a good business climate. What are your thoughts on that in terms of what Vermont can do to improve its business climate, generate jobs, grow the economy?
Well, just the perspective I'd bring to this is that we had a small R&D company developing experimental airplanes in California, and the latest one was a vertical takeoff airplane that had huge production potential. So, South Carolina and all the other states, except maybe Vermont, were always trying to get us to think about moving to their state if we went further into production.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got a good window on, what attracts people to moving to a state or not moving out of your state, like the incentive to get out of California.
So it's incentivizing, essentially.
Is very similar to the incentives to get out of Vermont. Taxes are real high. There's an awful lot of regulations, some of which don't make too much sense. And you had a legislature that you could describe as a little bit flaky, that you didn't know what was going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Like one year they had inventory tax. So whatever your inventory was, you paid X% of it. So I was flying up to Reno to see the first flight of the Learfan airplane on, I think it was January 2nd. They extended their deadline 2 days so they could make the first flight allegedly on time. And I see this huge brick building right across the California-Nevada border. And I said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, that's Montgomery Ward's warehouse. Because of the inventory tax, they built this huge structure so that they could supply all their stores in California from Nevada."
Right, sure.
So, I mean, but anyway, that even the legislature was smart enough to realize that was ridiculous. They eventually repealed it. But that's an example of when you keep these things keep coming.
Well,
it's frightening.
And you did say, you mentioned, the issue with regulations. Are there a few offhand that you might point to that you think are particularly burdensome?
Well, there's a lot of regulations that have to do with conditions of employment and what you have to do for your employees, and going door to door around town. There's a lot of small business people that would like to hire people and grow their business, but they feel that they can't because of the regulations. They said, if you get elected, please get rid of these regulations.
You mean the cost to employ, to expand your workforce?
Yeah. So
Social Security, payroll taxes, and is that?
Well, with a single payer, you haven't got to that yet, but if that's coming over.
Well, let's go to single payer, because obviously that's a hot issue right now. Act 48, which was passed in 2011, which puts us on a path to single payer. Governor Shumlin, who has been a big advocate, of course, has not been able to advance details on how to finance it. And of course, there have been some numbers I've seen out there that claim it's potentially going to require $2 billion or in excess of $2 billion in new revenue. Any ideas as to how we'll be able to finance something like this, or whether it's a smart path for Vermont?
Well, I don't think it's a smart path, and I haven't got the foggiest idea how I could realistically finance something like that. And my experience in working for the government is it'll be more expensive by far than whatever is predicted. I think the most realistic prediction is something like $2.4 billion. And it'll be more than that by the time they get through. And just, it has all the, single payer has all the evils of a monopoly, they don't really care about the customers. They just...
And some might argue that one of the benefits of single payer, and of course this could be debated, is that if the government is determining pricing for procedures for the cost of medicine, like they do with Medicare, that might bring down the cost of healthcare service in the state. Do you think that is something that you could subscribe to, or do you just don't think that's valid?
So I don't think it's realistic. You know, if you put the price below the cost, then you're not going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening with Medicare, like if you're a practicing physician, you can maybe stand the substandard Medicare reimbursements because you're getting overstandard reimbursements from other places.
From private citizens,
Yeah,
from companies.
Yeah, but then single payer, forget that. You know, you only have one.
Right,
So,
you only have one. Is there some middle of the road, or it just sounds like, I mean...
Well, the real answer is to do something about the system that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously prices are quite high right now. There's
Yeah.
some problems in the system now, so what do we do in the absence of
Well,
single
I
payer?
think tort reform would be a biggie for physician reimbursements. We had one of these Green Mountain discussion groups, and a fellow asked, he said, my daughter's an anesthesiologist in Texas. You got any idea what her premiums are for malpractice insurance? And people say, oh no, $15,000 a year, you know, $20,000 a year. The right answer was $3,000, because Texas has a pretty tough law about bringing a malpractice suit.
And is that reflected in their state premiums?
Yeah, that's why it's only $3,000.
But I mean, is health insurance premium, an equivalent premium in Texas versus Vermont, significantly lower?
Well, I don't know about that, but
There's not a lot of other factors that go into it.
It's got to be, because malpractice insurance is a huge part
No one would argue about that, I
of
think.
physicians' operating costs.
Yeah.
And so tort reform or something like the Texas situation would do a great deal to reduce the costs in Vermont. And the other thing, because we have so many restrictive regulations on insurance companies, there's only 2 of them in the state. Of course, a single payer, their plan will be administered by 1.
So you're thinking because we've set ourselves up in a manner that we kind of set us up, how do I say this? By only having 2 companies, we don't have a large enough playing field and enough competitors in there, and so that's also artificially driving our prices higher.
Yeah, that's right. If we made it so that it was worthwhile for more people to compete for business in the state, then you could go around and get the plan that was best for you. And so I think those 2 things would be things that could be done to directly impact the cost. Now, single payers going to be more expensive. Like if they have Blue Cross Blue Shield running it, okay, you got the overhead of a nonprofit insurance company, and then you've got the Green Mountain Care Board, which is only 5 people, but those 5 people have supporting staff and whatnot, so that's a lot of extra overhead when it's all said and done. So inherently it's more expensive than just even having a single insurance company in the state. So it's hard for me to see how it's going to save any money. And then you get into the inevitable thing that, like the problems we're having with the veterans' health care, that, well, your choices are to raise taxes to increase the money going into the health care program or to ration care.
Of course, one of the issues too is, you know, we also just are coming out of, 10 years of war, which of course is drastically taxing that resource, because we just have so many more veterans that are needing medical care.
Yeah, but the basic reaction to all that was to ration care, and then unfortunately lie about it, which made it even worse.
Yes.
But now they've appropriated more money, and you're supposed to be able to get relief by going to a private hospital or private physician, but that's not working out in practice because there's other factors in the law that prevent you from doing that. So, but I mean, if you want an example of what single payer would be like for the people that are using it, then the
Rationing is what you're,
Now, veterans care is not bad in Vermont. A lot of my friends are even World War II veterans, and they're pretty happy with the treatment they're getting in the state. It's not like Arizona.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just inherent in the nature of the beast that you either got to ration care or raise taxes, and the taxes are going to be I think, unrealistic anyway.
You know, and we talk about taxes, of course, and you decided to move to the state of Vermont in 2009. Is it just because when you got here, you weren't aware that maybe the cost of living was going to be higher, or just things changed in the matter of 5 years since you've been here that it's really motivated you?
Yeah, pretty much the latter. I mean, we always wanted to retire to Vermont, so I checked the tax situation versus other states.
Mm-hmm.
There was some kind of a spreadsheet you can get on the internet, and looked at it, and I said, well, you know, it's really not that much different. But maybe even by the time I got here, it was already accelerating. But
Right.
it's certainly accelerated since I've been here.
Certainly. You know, a lot of people would argue that Vermont's it's a nice place to live, and maybe a nice place to retire. It's just, you know, I certainly love the state. I've been here most of my life. We certainly are known for having a clean environment. What's your stance on that? You know, the whole green economy that is here. Our views, Vermont has taken a certain view on being very proactive in terms of keeping our waters clean, our air clean. What is your stance on all those issues?
No, that's very important. It's not in my resume, but when I was younger, I was active in cleaning up our local river, the Brandywine, that runs through Pennsylvania and through Delaware to the ocean. And we got that done, and it made a huge difference. And so, yeah, I'm very conscious of, you know, clean water, clean air, and all that. But there's some illogic in that, too, is that we're going hard over for solar power and wind power, and we're screwing up our environment. I mean, we're ruining the ridge lines where it's installed.
You're right.
And there's a lot of people that say we ought to quit.
The visual impact, at least.
Yeah, well, it's not just a visual impact. There's noise problems, and there's a certain amount of damage to the local environment and getting them up there and keeping them there.
Yeah, I guess every form of energy has negative externalities. Some, it depends on who you're asking, whether they're worse than others. Some might say, you know, putting gasoline in my tank is a lot better than having a impeded ridgeline behind my house, NIMBY, you know.
Yeah, well, then the solar panels are not exactly beautifying the scenery as you drive around Vermont. I mean, if you particularly go through Rutland, see that big thing they put in by the airport. And even got Bistro Henry's, you know, kind of a shock to see this thing.
Yeah, that certainly does stand out.
So the problem with all that is when I was in the 70s were tough years for us, the aerospace company. So I was into energy, and for a couple of years I was vice president of a company that was exploring alternative energy sources for Pacific Lighting, which was the big gas utility in Los Angeles. And we looked at everything. And you know, we're not gaining on it. The windmills only run when the wind blows. And if the wind's blowing real hard and there's more electricity than the utility can use, they're just wasting it. On the other hand, solar only works when the sun shines. But both of them are, in a way, kind of a fraud as far as keeping carbon dioxide out of the air. It takes more energy to make a solar cell than it generates during its useful lifetime. And that energy is supplied probably by a coal-fired electric plant in China. So you may be taking CO2 out of the air of Vermont, which is not a problem with all the woods and fields we have. We're probably a net absorber of CO2. But so we're doing things that screw up our environment that are not really solving the problem of taking carbon out of the air.
I actually hadn't heard that statistic, and it's always important to be cognizant of the entire cycle of producing something, what goes into it, what kind of energy goes into it. You know, all the inputs. So
Yeah,
that's an
well,
interesting statistic. I had not heard that before. I would have thought that over the whole life cycle of a cell, which is about 20, 30 years, that you would have a net benefit, but perhaps not. So
you have to
something
melt
to look
sand to
into.
make the quartz crystal to make the.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean that there won't be some other chemical breakthrough or something that someday it would be a.
Like the folks at, was it Lockheed Martin or General, with fusion, they're going to come out with a marketable fusion reactor within 10 years. I just heard that was last week.
Well, I've heard that every year.
Yeah, I know, that's true. We do hear that all the time, right? Along with solar thin film breakthroughs that are just around the corner.
Yeah,
so
they're
you're right.
just around the corner. Yeah,
Right.
they were just around the corner in 1981.
Everything's just
when
around the corner.
But the worst thing was the boss had a friend that had a sugar plantation in Australia.
Mm.
So the big deal was, instead of processing corn, we'll make ethanol out of sugarcane, rum in your car. But anyway, we went through that in great hideous detail, and it takes more energy to make it than when you burn it.
Well, that's for the farm lobby, ethanol. That's for the farmers.
Well, it's for somebody, but
that's my point. Is so that was really, I think, a big push was from the farm lobby to find more use
it's
of.
not cleaner. I mean, you're actually producing more CO2 than if you just burn the gasoline.
That's true.
So a lot of this environmental push is not realistic, and at least at the present state of technology. Now, maybe someday. And there is some hope for nuclear fusion. That's not a ridiculous idea, but nobody's really mastered it yet.
And that's also probably a bigger issue than why you're here today. And we're running out of time, but there's one other issue I want to talk about, and that had to do with drug testing of welfare recipients, or maybe there's a better way, but you had touched on that in your candidate statement about your views.
Yeah, the idea is that a drug statement or drug testing, if that was a requirement to get state aid, you would capture the attention, at least, of the people that had that problem, and that's probably why they need the assistance.
Mm-hmm.
So, instead of driving them away, like a lot of states have already passed some kind of rule about that, and some of them have been contested in court, and the basis is not fair. You're denying somebody something just because they're poor and all this.
Right.
But I don't think you necessarily have to deny them the assistance. It's the idea that you find out that whether or not they have a drug problem, and if they have a drug problem, you have to force them into some kind of a successful rehabilitation program, at least give them a chance to kick the habit.
Yeah, and of course, devil's advocate, some might argue though that's making kind of maybe an unfair assumption that a much larger percentage than of recipients of aid have a problem. I know this issue has blossomed up in other states. I think Florida was one that you may be referring to.
Well, it's a small percentage of the population generally, and so probably an equally small percentage of the people that need assistance. But rather than subsidizing them so they can continue their habit and continue the downward spiral,
sure,
it'd be better to stop that if you possibly can.
How much would a program like that cost?
Actually, it's according to Jeff Norman's report that described the situation up in Rutland called Mandela House, where it's a rehab thing for heroin addicts. It's about 1/4 of the cost of incarceration. So there's maybe some kind of net cost benefit when it's all said and done, because if they persist in the habit, they're going to fall foul of the law. They're going to be stealing stuff to pay the drug dealer.
And I wish we had more time to talk about incarceration and the host of other issues, but I understand you're going to be in the debate tomorrow night, and you'll have plenty of time to answer plenty of other, probably a lot harder questions than you've answered here. But Tony, great to have you here.
Okay,
good luck to you.